All right, everyone, it's time for a little bit of analysis of the the Mike Pence, Kamala Harris debate. The VP debate, of course, was last night, earlier tonight, if you're Eastern time or whatever. Again, Amsterdam applies. I know it looks like nighttime out still because it's so dreary. It'll be like that until probably about March, more or less. Mike Pence won. And by a considerable margin. It was basically what I expected, and that almost makes it boring because I was hoping that something significant would happen. When I got up, I looked at tweets and so forth about the debate. I found that the legacy media, by and large, and all the liberal talking heads were talking about a fly that briefly landed on Pence's head. I extrapolated from that the idea that they would have been attacking him for something substantive, if that hadn't happened, and the fact that an insect managed to steal the show showed that they just didn't want to report on anything else because they knew that Pence had blown it out of the water. It's difficult because basically the only thing they can do to cover for Kamala, who flubbed this badly, in my opinion, did actually maybe even a little bit more poorly than I expected, to tell the truth, is to selectively edit clips, make Mike Pence look sexist or something like that. Kind of falls flat. Pence going into this needed to show, number one, he needed to cover for Trump in a way Trump can't because of his verbiosity. Trump is graded off the cuff speaking in some ways, but when it's a debate, Trump typically interrupts, antagonizes, and goes off the rails. That's sort of stereotypically him. Pence is much more calm and focused in his delivery. He needed to do that, he did. He made the case for a Trump re-election, again, in a way that Trump can't. Number two, because Trump has coronavirus and is in his mid-70s, and because, of course, Biden is pushing 80, has had aneurysms, is demented, but the legacy media begs to differ, calls it a conspiracy theory, there's a huge outsized role for the running mate right now, because they're both in the age range that they could drop dead tomorrow, Trump and Biden, to tell the truth. Both candidates thus needed to make arguably the case for themselves as well. Pence did so ably. And of course he's been VP anyway, so he sort of gets a semi-incumbent advantage in that sense. With Kamala, I don't think that she did. I think that often she tried to echo Obama. And really, she did what she's done at past debates, and this was predictable, which is she tries to use the soaring emotional language, look at the camera and talk directly to the audience. Oh, how do you feel? Do you feel safer? Do you feel wealthier? The problem is that because of her personality and because of the way in which she carries her tone especially, and the weird faces arguably that she makes at times, I think she fell flat, dude. Basically, this debate is an appeal. This is basically the final true appeal, you could say, to independent voters. Again, because you've got these two relatively old candidates. One of them has a disease that some people think is the plague, although he's recovering or has already recovered. The other one's 78 years old and has had several brain aneurysms. I would argue that in some ways this debate was more important than the presidential ones. We sort of already know what we're getting with Trump and Biden. With Trump, we're getting a dude who's kind of verbose, obnoxious, sort of goes off the rails, but he's got these last few years as a track record of sort of what he's done and what he wanted to do. We don't really have a general, fully fleshed out campaign from either candidate at this point. We know what Biden stands for. He stood for it consistently for almost half a century. He has recently done a 180 on most issues, but we know what he says and we know what he's done. With the vice presidential candidates waiting in the wings on these two elderly gentlemen, ostensibly, it takes an outsized role. Now, as far as the issues, they spoke about coronavirus, of course, and climate change, the economy. Pence dominates them all. The problem is that Kamala Harris attempted to attack him and was never successful in doing so. He managed to whittle down Biden's plan specifically, and he did this in a way that Trump can. This is the important part, and this is why he won in an outsized way. Trump had 28% in the CNN Snap debate poll. Pence had 38%. Trust me, if you can get 38% of CNN's audience, which is what they were polling at the time, to say that Mike Pence won the debate, Hitler Jr., according to the average CNN viewer, trust me, that's a hearty victory. 28% was surprisingly high. Trump got more than he got against Hillary Clinton by a couple of points in the same poll in 2016. Mike Pence blows it out of the water by approaching 40. Trust me. On the Green New Deal, Pence pointed out, and I wish Trump had done this because it would have been more forceful, and I'd like to see him do it maybe at the next debate. If it happens, Biden's threatening not to show up. If Trump has coronavirus, he better test negative or we shouldn't have a debate at all. Yeah, what a cop-out that is. Okay, move it back a few days then. No problem. We'll just we'll tell Biden it's not happening and then have him show up 48 hours without any prep. Let's see how good he does. On the Green New Deal, on raising taxes, on fracking and so forth, Kamala Harris straight up lied. Although there is one instance in which technically it's just kind of a lie, but not really. It's half true, and that's on taxation. Look carefully at that section of the debate, which is about a third of the way through it, in the economy section. It is true that Biden has pledged not to raise taxes on anyone who's making less than $400K. And he probably won't raise taxes on them. He'll just let the Trump tax cuts expire, and this is what Pence pointed out. Now, actually, I wish that he had gone even a little further into it. The average family got $2,000 of tax relief. That's for some roughly median income, average family size. For people who are entrepreneurs, it was way more. For people in states that didn't restore the mandate at the state level anyway, like Vermont, unfortunately, they got even more because there was a 2.5 penalty associated with the ACA. I wish he had fleshed out a little bit more. The other thing I wish he had done is be a little bit more defensive when it came to pre-existing conditions. It is the honest truth that while the ACA goes bye-bye if Trump is reelected and has any will in Congress at all, and or a court case, I think the Fifth Circuit took that up a while ago, and it's kind of pending SCOTUS potentially with the ACA. Roberts, of course, flipping on that many years ago. They've already designed a standalone bill to protect pre-existing conditions under independent legislation. The problem is the Democrats won't pass it. Why? Because they know that if they pass it, there's no more use for the ACA, and they want to retain it. They want the bureaucracy. They want to keep siphoning money and keep things corporatized and monopolistic in order to jack prices up and keep people government reliant so they can steal more money from them. Here's the thing, though. If you eliminate the Trump tax cuts, it screws people like me disproportionately. Bill Gates will still be a billionaire. Bezos will still be a billionaire. They'll pay hundreds of millions more potentially, at least in personal taxes on paper, but at the end of the day, they're still rich. For people like me who are somewhere in the middle or upper middle class, especially the self-employed, Trump is promising to do away with FICA. It would save me, I don't even know how many thousands of dollars a year in federal taxes I'd save. It would be a huge boon to me. Fuck student debt relief. Hell, at that point, I'll pay it all off in a couple years myself, and I get tens of thousands in debt. I'd be at leisure to do that under Trump's proposals. He saved me, how much did he save me? It was like $4,000 or something in federal taxes. It's a huge amount of money because he added a 20% write-off on that 15% surcharge that self-employed individuals suffer under. 20% of that, plus a general reduction for, I think, all of my tax brackets. It's great. Trump's tax plan worked. For the average working, middle, upper middle classer, they're the ones disproportionately affected. That is the truth. And we'll get a doubling down on that if that happens with the Biden camp. They do want to impose the Green New Deal. It's on their website. Even the fucking moderator pointed out. By the way, shout out to the moderator for being considerably better than the dude from the first debate. Largely letting the candidates speak. Not being completely one fucking sided. You know, when the Trump fans aren't complaining about the moderator, you know the moderator did a good job, by the way. I don't really see any significant complaints about her, so excellent. And the last thing I would say is Kamala Harris has a personality problem in the general sense. Now, I know that when you say that about a female candidate, people immediately, they get their dander up and say, sexist, sexist. Oh, you only say that because she's a female. No, I'm saying it because she has a rasping personality. She reminds it much like Whitmer or Klobuchar, to some degree Hillary Clinton, I'd say Buttigieg at times, arguably, and definitely Beto fucking Rourke, trust me. It's not about gender, trust me. It reminds me of the HR person tapping their toes, jiggling their bracelets, and thinking about ways to antagonize you in such a way that you can't do anything about it. Just to put the screws to you because they don't like you. Is it like the gossipy girls in high school or something like that? Teasing people, gossiping about them, smirking behind their back, and then backstabbing their friends over some dude or something. That's what she reminds me of. The problem is that personality really shouldn't come into play much within presidential politics, but it does. Again, optics, perception over reality. That's basically what politics is. It's a floor show. Most of it's bullshit. It's sloganeering, it's kissing babies and shaking hands and stuff like that. Trump has a problem. Trump can't get his message across very easily. Pence compensates very, very well for that. Harris didn't add anything to the Biden camp. She echoed the same things that Biden was saying, made the same mistakes, told the same lies, but now she had an opponent who was able to call her out in a more linear form. As opposed to Trump, who starts calling you out on the economy, pivots to green energy, pivots again to what would happen if you were in charge when the coronavirus erupts and stuff. And that's the other big win for Pence, was on the coronavirus response. Because he was able to come out and tell what, those of us who are more into political analysis maybe already knew, which is Fauci and all the others agreed with Trump largely on the response. Trump did respond. I wish that Pence had attacked the Dems more for saying party in Chinatown back in February. It was funny when Kamala Harris talked about, when you couldn't find toilet paper, how safe did you feel? Were you not panicking at the time? Well, yeah, people were forewarned that people get panicky when something bad happens. If you honestly believe that Biden in the presidential role would have acted any differently, of course he would. Hell, we'd still be locked down. We'd be facing a depression right now. Ultimately, I give Pence a 70-30 victory here. Very substantial, exactly what was needed. I would be surprised if this moved the polling much, but it can't be bad for Trump at the end of the day. Again, when the legacy media, which clearly wants Biden, when the big takeaway that they have is a fly landed on Mike Pence during the debate, what more can you possibly say? I practically knew that Pence won when I got up within the first 5 minutes of opening Twitter, simply based on what I saw from the corporate media. I thought that was very, very funny indeed. That's about all. Peace out.